Let me tell you before we get into it that the Old Testament had a vocabulary that was about that big. It wasn't big at all. Therefore, the Hebrew has one word for covenant, and it is the word brith, B-R-I-T-H. Now, where, though, did the word come from? Well, as we turn back over here to the board, let me show you. The Hebrew word is brith, meaning to cut or to bind. Now, the strange thing about all this is that we don't know where this word came from. Though you find it used in the Bible something like 280 times, we don't know the origin of the word. It may have come from the Hebrew word bara, meaning to eat together, or it may have come from the word berit, meaning between, or an old Akkadian word, baru, meaning to bind or to fetter. If that's right, then all three of those words would fit pretty well, wouldn't it? It means that we're binding each other together, we're eating together and bonding with one another, and we're cutting a covenant. In the Old Testament, that's what it meant to make a covenant. They called it cutting a covenant. And the reason for that, by the way, we're going to jump way ahead here, is that they would take an animal in covenant making, they'd cut him down the middle. The children of Israel never cut their heads off like the pagans did. They cut them down the middle and put them hair side up, half of him over here and half of him over here. We'll get into all that detail a whole lot later on, okay? Let me hurry on, though, to the Greek word, because the Greeks are unlike the Hebrew. The Greeks had a word for it. I mean, their vocabulary was much larger, and they had a word that would describe what we're talking about. In fact, there are two Greek words that are very important in our study. Notice the first Greek word is sunetheke. Let's put it up here. Sunetheke, and sunetheke is now listen, it is a negotiated contract where one or two people get together and they barter and they come to some deal or some negotiating ploy where they can come up with a win-win situation. Let me show you what I'm talking about. John, I'm going to sell you my car. Would you like to buy my car? I'll tell you what I want, John. I want $20,000 for that car. How much are you going to offer for it? $5,000. You mean you're going to offer me $5,000 for my $20,000 car? Tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to come down to $19,900 for that car. How much you offer me? Oh, you come up $10,000. Well, you've doubled it anyway. You're so generous you're going to die of an enlarged heart one of these days. But anyway, I'm going to come down for you too. I'm going to come down to $19,800. Oh, are you coming up to $15,000? Well, you see, we could go on all night. But you see, what I do is I sell my car for $19,700, and he's come up from $5,000. Well, I didn't say he was a good negotiator. I just said he was going to buy my car. Okay, that's all I care about. But you notice what happened? John had a price in his mind. I have a price in my mind. He didn't like my price. I didn't like his price. So what do? We worked it out. That is a sunetheke agreement. Okay? Now, since we're doing definitions, I've got to give you the English term of that kind of a covenant. Are you ready for this? Parity. Say that with me. Parity. One more time. Parity. Parity. Just think of a pair working out an agreement, okay? But that means that if I don't like something that you're offering me, I've got a right to come back and hassle with you on it. Now, what I want to do every time we talk about one of these covenants is I got to tell you a story. I'm a storytelling dude, if you don't know that already. And so my story number one is the story of World War I. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Axis powers and the Allied powers fought from 1914 to 1919. Now, the United States didn't get into that until April the 6th of 1917. Now, when that happened, the German forces knew, for all intents and purposes, that they couldn't win the war. Therefore, we fought on for a little more than a year, and in November the 11th of 1918, the warring factions got so tired, they met in a boxcar in Paris, and they signed what was known as the Armistice Agreement. Now, the Armistice Agreement, by the way, was not what we would think of as a covenant or a peace treaty. it was a covenant but not a peace treaty, because they didn't say we're forever going to stop our fighting. They said we'll stop for a while, okay? And with all intents and purposes of picking up arms and doing it all over again. By the way, I'll throw this in at no added cost to you. The word armistice comes from the word armistitium, and that comes from two words put together, arma meaning arms, and stitium meaning to stop. And so they said, I'll stop my arms if you'll stop your arms. And that's what they did. But that is a parity agreement. Why? Because one said, I want you to stop at this point on the map, and they said, no, we want to stop over here, and we said, well, we'll work out an agreement right about here. That is a parity agreement. One more time, what is it called? Parity agreement. Now, the second kind of covenant that we want to talk about is what is known as diatheke. A diatheke is this kind of covenant where a superior called a suzerain hands down a covenant to a vassal. Suzerain and a vassal, okay? Now let me say up front that before we get into all these covenants, I'm going to use myself as an example in covenant making because I'm the only one I know, and I'm the king of Arizona. That's my right that I have to do that if I'm going to be making these videos, okay? But a diatheke is that if I'm the king of Arizona, I'll come to Mark over here and I'll say, do you want to enter into a covenant with me? And he'll say, yes, I do. And I say, well, here are the terms. If you want to run your cattle on my land, then it's going to cost you X amount of money. I'll give you grass. I'll give you this. And he does not have the right now to say, well, now, I'm just not sure I like that. I tell you what, I'll give 50 cents a head instead of $1 a head for me to run my cattle on your land. He doesn't have that input. Because in a diatheke, folks, it's either take it or leave it. And in some instances, it's take it or get killed. Because this, folks, is the kind of a covenant that a general would make with a vanquished foe.